Hello and welcome to Amrita by the Book. My name is Amrita. This is my booktube, and I cannot believe that it's been a solid year since I filmed the first of these, because this is the mid-year Freakout tag. Now, the mid-year Freakout tag, for those of you who don't know, is basically just an update on the books that I've read over the past 6 months. So it's just me telling you about the best and worst things that I have read over the past 6 months, and also what I'm looking forward to in the coming 6 months. So let's get started. What is the best book that I have read in the first half of 2021? And I think this can only be A Desolation of Peace by Arcady Martin. Like, this book ticked off every single box that I had. It was engaging, it was complex, it was beautifully written, it was imaginative, it was everything. Like, it was political, and it was affecting, and it was emotional, and it was scary. I mean, it was everything that you would want in a book, and it was fun. So yeah, by far the best thing that I've read in 2021 so far has been A Desolation Called Peace. The next question is, what is the best sequel that I've read so far? And it again has to be A Desolation Called Peace. I'm sorry, I have linked my review to both A Memory Called Empire and A Desolation Called Peace. I reviewed them together. I also have a print review of both of these books that is coming out in the Portland Review. I don't know if it will be published by the time this video comes out, but I will update this video's description with the link to that particular review when it comes out. But in the meantime, you can check out my video about this duology, because it is fantastic. If you like science fiction, if you like, I describe it as Star Trek meets Ender's Game, and it is honestly one of the best things that I've read. Next, what is a new book that I haven't read but I want to? And I think that has to be John Gwynn's The Shadow of Gods, or Shadow of the Gods. So last year I did this TBR video, 21 books that I wanted to read in 2021. That was the theme. And John Gwynn's Malice was on it, because that's a quartet that everyone talks about when they talk about John Gwynn. So I was kind of waiting to read that first and then maybe read this one, but I watched Jeremy Fee's review of Shadow of the Gods, and he asked me a very simple question. He was like, look at the cover of Malice versus the cover of this one, which has a giant dragon on it. Wouldn't you rather read this one? And I was like, actually, yes, I would. I have a very strong bias against fantasy authors who haven't yet finished their series, and it's based on painful experience. So unless your name is Brandon Sanderson, I genuinely feel a little bit wary, anxious when I pick up, the first book in a series that hasn't been completed yet. But I think John Gwynn has demonstrated that he finishes the series, so maybe I do want to read this before he finishes it. Next, what are my most anticipated releases for the second half of the year? I know that TJ Klune is coming out with a book that, I read the description of it and it just made me laugh already. So I know that I want to read that one. And then Kavita Rao is coming out with a book called Lady Doctors. It's been pushed back because of the pandemic-related production issues. So I don't know when it's going to come out, but I think it will be released sometime this year. And it's about the first wave of women doctors in India and the challenges that they've had to face and how difficult it was for them to choose that profession and then to succeed in it. And it sounds really interesting to me, and I was lucky enough to read a little bit of it. And honestly, yeah, that is definitely something that I'm watching out for. What was my biggest disappointment this year so far? And that has to be The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I want to give her a bit of a slack because I know she's a debut author, but honestly, the more I think about that book, the more upset I get. The historical parts of it were great, and if she ever writes another historical book, I think I will read it, even though the historical parts in this one sort of took a sudden left turn towards like magical realism slash fantasy, where I was like, where did that come from? But that was fine. I could roll with it. But the contemporary bits of it, I mean, oh my God, I hate Caroline. Like, she is the worst character that I have ever come across. Like, by the end of the book, I hated her even more than her cheating husband. And that's saying something. What book was my biggest surprise this year? And that has to be Winter's Orbit. I thought that that was going to be a science fiction book. It turned out to be a science fiction romance, which is a subgenre that I don't read much of. And honestly, like, I enjoyed it. I know there are people out there who have had their problems with it, but and I think that it is a book that needs to come with a trigger warning for domestic violence that happens off screen. But the emotional fallout of that kind of continues to follow this character through this book. But I mean, I really bought the romance. I thought it was well paced. I didn't think that it was going to be a clean romance for some reason. Like, once I understood what the concept was, I thought it would be a bit more, you know, steamy, but it wasn't, and that was also a surprise and not an entirely welcome one, to be honest. But it was interesting, and I will read, you know, more books by this author. Who's my new favorite debut author, or an author new to me? And I think that has to be Alexis Hall. I think his Boyfriend Material actually came out, I think, in 2020 or maybe even 2019. But I didn't read it until earlier this year, and I fell for that book like a ton of bricks. Like, I just really loved that book. It was so funny. It was so charming. I felt really deeply and badly for both the characters in it. Yeah, I love it. Who is my newest fictional crush? And this has to be Fatma from A Master of Jinn. I mean, from the moment that you meet her, you know, she's dressed in these sharp suits. She's clearly competent at her job. She's just cool, you know, in a way that everybody around her can just tell. And she's smart, and she's resourceful, and she's brave, and she's sexy, and oh my God, like, Fatima could turn me. Who is my newest favorite character? And I actually have two. One is Hadia from A Master of Jinn, who is just, you know, like honey badger in a hijab. Like, she is out there getting shit done, and she doesn't care whether you're with her or not. She is going to achieve the things that she set out to, and she will improve all our lives while she's at it. God damn it. I want her to be my friend. I want her to be my sister. I would just, you know, I would die for her. My other really favorite character this year has been Eve Brown from the Talia Hibbert series, and I kind of lost it when there's a point where she runs over this guy and she is trying to help him, and he's just in so much pain, and so she's trying to get his mind off his pain, and she's just like, do you want me to show you my tits? And she does it in such an earnest, helpful manner, and I immediately, you know, I was like, yeah, I love Eve. A book that made me cry is, of course, The Witch's Heart, which I've spoken about multiple times before, and you should all get it. It's really well written. But also, so this book didn't make me cry, but it did make me depressed. Does that count? But it's She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. But there is this build-up with this particular character. I mean, it starts from the very first page, you know, like, it's just bad from the get-go. But there's a secondary character who gets like almost equal space, actually. And you see them go through all these different things, and they come at the end and they achieve their goals, and then they realize just how terrible the achievement of those goals can be, and your heart just breaks for them. And I was reading this while I was also watching these really affecting Chinese dramas, like historical dramas, and it was all a bit much. And I would actually take the feelings that I had for this book and transfer it to the Chinese dramas that I was watching at the time. And so I would just like cry while I was watching the Chinese drama. But it was actually like mostly leftover emotion from the book. I'm a very complex person. What is a book that made you happy? And Lois McMaster Bujold came out with another book in the Penric and Desdemona series. And I mean, it's not like a happy book as such, but it just made me happy to read it because it's basically a novel-length book in the series because the others are all novellas. And I was reading the reviews and people were saying that, oh, maybe like this is the ending of the series, which would make me very sad. Like, I hope she writes more of these because I love Penric, I love Desdemona, I love their story and the things that they do. But it did explain a lot of things that has been happening in the longer arc of the books. And it was a, you know, it's like a good addition to the series, I think. So that made me really happy to read. What is the most beautiful cover that you have bought or received this year? And I like that this was this specific as a question because I've been reading a lot of library books this year. So I think the one that I bought was Murder at the Mushaira, and you guys take a look at this cover. Like, even in ebook format, it is so beautiful, and the physical one is probably even more beautiful, which is why I'm saying that I'm gonna buy the physical copy of this. Next is, what books do I need to read by the end of the year? And this question always gives me a bit of anxiety because need, I'm just like, oh no, do I need to read something? And I think apart from, like, you know, like I do need to finish Alice B. Talkless at some point this year because I promised Margaret that I would finish reading it in March, and now it's June and I still haven't read it. So yeah, I do need to finish reading that at some point. But in more recent ones, I think I really want to read Symmetry Boys by Aidan Thomas. Which is a book that Nat from Nerdy Nat Reads championed pretty heavily last year, and I told her that it's going on my list, and it did go on my list, and I'm going to read it. Next is Rachel Palmer Takes the Cake, which is the new book from Alexis Hall, and I was reading KJ Charles review it, like she was talking about it on her Twitter, and she said it was so good that she was dreaming about it, and that's how much she didn't want to let go of the characters. And I was like, oh my god, if KJ loves it, I'm going to love it. Like, honestly, seriously, if you want to know what my opinion about a certain thing will be, just look over and see if KJ Charles has read it and has an opinion, because that will be my opinion, like word for word. That woman has never steered me wrong, knock on wood. But I really want to read this book. Another book that I want to read is A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, which is a book and a series that Rosie Cockshut really loves, and she's been championing it, and pretty much as long as I've known her. And now another one of my friends is reading it, and she has fallen for it like hook, line, and sinker. So I know it's good, and I know it's available at the library too. So I absolutely will get it either this month or the next, I think. Another book that I've been meaning to read for a long time, and I absolutely want to read it this year, is Space Opera by Catherine Valente. I have her new book read through NetGalley, and I just want to finish reading that, but I also want to read Space Opera. Another person that I mean to get into this year is Zen Cho. I think the one that I have already is The Sorcerer to the Crown, which came very highly recommended by a person whose opinions I trust. So I'm going to read that. And of course, I want to read Wolfsong by TJ Klune. I'm on a real TJ Klune kick. So that's the one that all my romance friends have adored over the past year. So I want to read that one. That's quite a few books to get through, huh? It's good to have a plan, I guess. Right, so I'm not tagging anyone for this one because this is really just a half-year update. So if that's something that you would like to do, then absolutely do it. I will put the questions down below in the description so you can use that. It's a really great little way to tell people, you know, what you've been reading, what you've liked, what you haven't. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time for the other half of this year. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button.